Hey, before we get into it today, I do want to talk about our friends at Chicagoland Chevy Dealers. Summer road trip season is here. You know, everyone's taking those trips to Michigan. You're going up to Wisconsin, maybe Iowa, maybe Southern Illinois, maybe Indiana. It doesn't matter. Just make sure you get a new Chevy because it's the perfect time. It really is the perfect time. The SUV lineup in the new Silverado truck has all the space you need to comfortably get to where you're going. ChevyDriveChicago.com has the latest offers on all vehicles and can help you find your local Chevy dealer today. Every Chevy is number one pick. ChevyDriveChicago.com is the official truck partner of the Chicago Bears. And yeah, it's not just the Silverado. You guys know the full fleet. They got the Colorado, they got the Trax, they got the Cruze, they got the Blazer, they got the Traverse, they got the Suburban, they got the Tahoe. I love the Tahoe. Great road trip car. Great road trip car, Lance. Everyone loves the Tahoe. But they're all great. They really are great. And you got to go check those out now at ChevyDriveChicago.com to learn more. You should at least. It's a great site to make sure you're ready to go for the summer. And on that note, I do want to toss it to today's episode. It's kind of True Crime Friday-esque. So for those of you who have kind of been missing that, we're covering a crazy case that's going on out of Massachusetts. And it's the Karen Read trial. If you don't know what that is, if you do, you know it's a wild one. And if you don't, I think you're going to find it very interesting. So we'll get into that. And I should note before this rolls out, everything on here is alleged. Everything is still in the court of law. And no one knows who did what. And innocent until proven guilty. And on that note, we could toss it over with Jerry Thornton. All right, man, today is Thursday. It is June 13th. Welcome to the Dog Walk presented by Barstool Sports. Today, my guest is Jerry Thornton. Jerry Thornton is one of the longest standing members of Barstool Sports. He is a Boston, Massachusetts guy. And today we're going to be talking about a case that has definitely taken over your area and has kind of caught its way here. People have asked me to cover this as well. The Karen Read case that's in trial right now. Jerry, first of all, thank you for doing this. And I'm really interested to hear your perspective about what's going on with this.
Sure. And I appreciate you having me on. And this thing is a handful. I get that. And if you go on YouTube and just put in Karen Read, you're going to see about 36 maybe lawyers who full time are just live streaming this thing. And I mean like 7 hours a day of somebody just in a box in the corner, just live doing this, live covering this and commenting or whatever. And by way of a little bit of background, before I went full-time at Barstool, and I was part-time forever, I was working for the Massachusetts trial court. I was a badge monkey. I was the guy who sat there in the corner and barely paid attention to trials. And I'd have lawyers come up to me during break and just go, "Hey, how do you think it's going?" And I'd be saying, "I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I'm here on my phone. I'm researching Patriots draft picks, and I'm sure you're doing great." What is it, like murder? Is it shoplifting? I'm sure it's well. And now it's my job to focus on the Patriots. And now I'm down the rabbit hole of this trial. So I get it's hard to comprehend. And hopefully you and I can kind of just lay it out in easily digestible pieces so your viewers understand.
But I think that speaks volumes, Jerry, because you weren't interested in a lot of things that they were talking about. You, like you said, you were on your phone, but for some reason this case struck you and it caught my eye and it's catching a lot of people's eye. So let's kind of start at the beginning for people that don't know anything about this case. Who's Karen Read? Why is her name all over the place? What's the situation at hand?
Okay, I'll lay it out first in the parts that are not in dispute. The bare facts of this case is that on January 22nd, 2022, I'm sorry, January 29th, I'm already wrong, that this Boston police officer, who apparently has served with distinction, a guy by the name of John O'Keefe, and his girlfriend, Karen Read, of many years, who was helping him raise his niece and nephew who lost both their parents to illness. I mean, so that speaks to the volumes about what kind of a person he was. They went out to a local bar in the town of Canton, Massachusetts. Now, I'm originally from Weymouth, not to brag. I don't want to lord that over anybody. Yes, I'm from the fine breeding that comes from Weymouth, Massachusetts, which is in the same county as Canton. So they go out to a bar. They bump into a mix of other people, including some other cops who live in town. One of whom is a guy named Brian Albert, also a Boston police officer. And there's a lot of Brians in here, so I apologize. Well, they get invited back to Brian Albert's house for an after party, which they go to. So Karen drives. She stops out front. John O'Keefe gets out of the car. She goes home. He's found near death in the morning. She hadn't heard from him all night. She got worried. She calls some friends. They go back to where she last saw him. They find him laying in the front yard, now covered in snow because it was a heavy snowfall that night. And he's at death's door. They call 911. First responders come. They try to resuscitate him with CPR. Doesn't work. They get to the hospital where he's pronounced dead. That much everyone agrees with. Now, here's what the Commonwealth of Massachusetts says. They were having marital relationship problems. They weren't married. She, in a drunken rage, backs her SUV up to about 24 miles an hour, intentionally slams into him with the passenger side taillight of her car, sends him into the front yard. She then goes home, and then the search happens in the morning, and that's where they find him. Now, the rest of the world, pretty much, the internet mostly, and I got to give credit where it's due. There's a local blogger by the name of Turtle Boy who either got information or just smelled a rat from this from the beginning, because the alternate theory is that he went in the house where things went sideways. There was some beefs there. Fight broke out between him and the other cops. It's believed that a lot of suspicion around their 18-year-old son. The Albert's 18-year-old son was a kid named Colin, who was a freshman at my alma mater, Bridgewater State University, played football or whatever. They also had a dog, a German Shepherd by the name of Chloe, that people suspect was involved in this because the autopsy photos that were leaked looked like he had claw marks all up and down his arm. So then the theory goes that he's at death's door. Everybody panics. They can't have this happen in their house. So they physically dragged his body out to the side of the road, maybe to make it look like he got hit by a snowplow, or alternatively, that it was Karen Reed that did it. Well, what didn't help at all was that the investigation was led by a state trooper by the name of Michael Proctor, who is friends with the Alberts. In fact, the aforementioned Colin Albert, the teenage kid there, was the ring bearer at his wedding, which should have just disqualified him from being in charge of this, right? He should have just recused himself. I'm conflicted out of this thing. He didn't. He conducted the investigation, and everything that has followed looks like it was all to cover for this family that he's really tight with. Now, let me just add one more name before I throw it to you to let you know, so you can let me know what you want to hear more about. There's a pivotal woman in this by the name of Jen McCabe. She's the woman that was at the bar that asked Karen Reed and John O'Keefe to come back to the Alberts house. She was at the house. She was the one that Karen Reed called to get in her car to drive around, and was with her when they found his body in the front yard. She also, at some point, Googled how long to die in the cold. Now, the phone records show, the data shows that she did it around 2:22 in the morning. So it would have been after he had come into the house and the fight broke out or whatever, but before Karen Reed showed back up at 6:30 in the morning to find him. The Commonwealth's argument is, no. She didn't Google it at that hour. She Googled it the next morning at 6:30 because Karen Reed was screaming at her to find out how long someone dies in the cold. Well, why does it show up at 2:22 in the morning? Oh, because she was Googling some info about a basketball team that her daughter was interested in. Again, 2:22 in the morning. And that basketball team, it turns out that tryouts were long since over. so that dog doesn't hunt. And there are crazier parts of this that I can get into, but first I want to kick it back to you to see if this all makes sense or if there's some missing parts of this.
No, yeah, you laid it out pretty well. I guess my question out of the gate was, why did they think throwing him in the spot where they did, or allegedly, that side of the story?
Yeah. We'll do all the allegedly, and supposedly, and reportedly. Those are the friends of bloggers and podcasters alike.
Exactly. Like if they did put him in that spot, why what conclusion would they jump to that it was because she backed into him? You know, like why was that? That's interesting that would be what they would go with, right?
Yeah, it feels to me like they were making it up as they went along, that none of this was premeditated, that they put him there and thought maybe the snowplow, whatever. But then it was, wait a minute, Karen Reed's not here. You know, she's not one of us too. That's a part of this too, that this is a town that really feels incestuous. As a matter of fact, the first time that I really dove into this at all, I was at the house of one of my best friends, a guy that I've been hanging out with since we were in first grade, who lived in Canton for about 20 years. And I asked him about this, and it was pulling a thread. You know, it was like if you ask some gamer nerd about a realm that he belongs to, where he's like a 7th level elf wizard, and you're sitting there for an hour while he's talking on and on about this street and those people, and he knows them all, and everyone seems to know everybody except Karen Reed. She's not from that town. So that sort of seems to factor into it again. That's the theory. But it's what happened in the aftermath, too, that made this thing, as the kids say, really sus from the beginning. Phone calls that were deleted, lame excuses for things like both Brian Albert, who owned the house, and Brian Higgins, who's an ATF agent who was there at the party. They both later destroyed their phones. And I don't mean upgraded. I don't mean like we all do, like, all right, this one, it won't hold a charge, or, hey, I really like how many megapixels are in the new camera, or whatever. They got rid of their phones altogether, took out the SIM cards, destroyed them. Brian Higgins testified that, yes, and they had to drag it out of him, that, yeah, he took the SIM card and the phone and he put them in separate bags and he threw them away at an Air Force base on Cape Cod. And when you do this, it's not an upgrade. You don't just get all your data transferred onto your phone. You lose your number. You lose your contacts. You lose all your pictures, all your data. And Higgins said, well, I did this because someone I was investigating got my personal number and called me. Yeah, that had been 3 months earlier. So he waited 3 months for this, but after he realized that he was in danger of getting exposed on this. But the biggest hypocrisy for me, if I can boil it down to one thing that totally doesn't add up, in the middle of the night, so let me put an exact time on it, like 12:30 at night ish. Karen Reed called John O'Keefe. That's in her data. John O'Keefe called her back, which sort of feels like, are you here? Yeah, I'm pulling in, which house is it? Whatever. She then proceeded to call him 7 more times in the span of 21 minutes, from like 12:20 to like 12:51 or thereabouts. Well, what were all those calls? She said they were butt dials. When was the last time you butt dialed somebody? Honestly, like butt dialed, but it didn't go to voicemail, meaning you caught the butt dial and then you hung up, which is an extra action. If you do that 7 times, that's like 28 different things that you have to do to make that happen. And then more butt dialing happened. Brian Higgins, the ATF guy, butt dials, according to him, Brian Albert at 2:20 at night. How did he do it? Well, he was asleep and the phone was on his nightstand and he butt dialed. He then gets butt dialed back by Brian Albert. And what was he doing? He was making sweet, sweet love to Mrs. Albert. Now, let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask this. I don't do a great Nicholson, but the way he asked it in The Shining. Are you a married man? Because if you are, you know that no couple is taking each other to the summit of Bone Mountain at 2:22 at night. Not plus or minus 5 hours of 2:22 at night is that happening. If I was the defense lawyer, I'd just say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do you believe that this guy nudged his phone while riding the F train with his wife at 2:22 in the morning? And everyone's just going to say, not guilty. But yeah, so it's been this pathetic series of lies that isn't to cover up like shoddy police work, allegedly. It's to cover up a cover-up, like that this whole thing was designed to frame an innocent woman in order to hide actual crimes created by a house full of law enforcement and their friends and family. And the state police of Massachusetts have had plenty of issues with corruption over the last few years, and this just feels like the worst of all of them.
So, right out of the gate, the big things, like you said, there's a relationship between the investigator and the party, the O'Keefe party, or the party who
the Albert family, and the McCabe's who are there, who people shorthand as calling the whole group of them the McAlberts. But so maybe we'll default to that. And again, credit to Turtle Boy for coming up with that term.
Yeah, that's good. And then obviously the Google search, and then a whole series of butt dials. Now, what is going against Karen right now? Like, what are the big things? Like, obviously, when it comes to hitting someone with a car, like, what do they have? Do they got a cracked tail light? Do they have anything like that? Where has that gone as far as what the public knows?
Yes, excellent question. Okay, so they have no eyewitnesses saying that she hit him. They have a police officer, like another lieutenant or something in the Canton PD, lived across the street. His Ring camera wasn't working, so we don't have that. What they have is pieces of the taillight, like you said, but even that is screwy as hell, because the initial search didn't find anything. They did find a cocktail glass because everyone left the bar with drinks in their hands. It must be nice, to live in that town and just be able to carry a glass with you out of a bar. But they found some pieces of clear glass, according to the first investigation, but not the pieces of a red polycarbonate taillight. But as the days went on, they did find them. Even the search for the taillight is weird, because there are photos of the scene. And this is a quiet street, a leafy suburb, the dead of winter, decent, modest, Garrison colonial house on a small lot. No one saw a body laying out there. No one can say that they definitively saw this guy, in spite of all the people coming and going. No one came out of the house. Now, there are like somewhere between, I forget, like a half a dozen or maybe 9 first responder vehicles, police, fire, ambulance, all had the lights going. And to clear the snow, they broke out a leaf blower. Now, I don't know what it's like in Chicago, but a lot of municipalities don't let you run a leaf blower except certain hours of the day or night. Why? Because it's like having a 757 land in your backyard, and they're noisy as F, but nobody decided, out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I didn't bother getting out of bed to see what was the matter. They're out there, and there's video of them with a leaf blower just to take down the layers of snow, but they never found the lights until days later, after they towed her car, and this Michael Proctor had it in a sally port at the Canton police station and went all around it, and with no one else in sight. And the theory is they broke it apart, and then just over the days and weeks, they scattered the pieces around there. Now, another piece of this puzzle that the state is hanging its hat on is that they have witnesses saying that Karen Reed said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, or variations of that. But nobody who says that now or said it on the witness stand said it to the investigators at the time. They didn't say it to the grand jury at the time. And this thing is being investigated by the feds as a corrupt criminal enterprise by all these law enforcement people. No one said it to the federal grand jury either. There's no record of them saying it, but they suddenly got this in their head on the witness stand and all told a remarkably similar story. And I'll just leave it with one more name here. One of the EMTs was a woman named Katie McLaughlin. And she was asked about this. She said, yeah, I heard her say, I hit him at the time. She was hysterical. She said, I hit him. Again, did you say that before to the investigators? No. To the grand jury, to the other grand jury? No. And then they said, do you know Caitlin Albert? There's the daughter of this family that had the party. And she said nothing for a second, and she paused, and then she said, well, I know a Caitlin Albert. I went to high school with a Caitlin Albert. How well do you know her? Casual acquaintance, friend of friends. Well, within 20 minutes, there were 4 pictures of the two of them together at spring break, at lake houses, at a baby shower like a couple of months earlier. I said to my friend that I mentioned earlier, we've been best friends since first grade, I don't think that there are 4 pictures of you and me together. And the ones that were like our class pictures when we were in elementary school, and maybe a couple after like a golf tournament or something, just group shots. The fact that everyone is telling these tales that just don't add up, that just defy common sense, has only just thrown more logs on what is now a bonfire of suspicion around this whole thing.
The depth of this web is crazy. I also want to talk about Stella Blue Coffee, because at Stella Blue Coffee, we believe that good coffee is one of life's non-negotiables. Stop drinking those boring, tasteless big coffee beans and turn to Stella Blue. Remember, your mornings are sacred. It's time to start treating them that way. Not only are Stella Blue Coffee's premium beans sourced with the most coffee-rich geographies on earth, but they're also Big Cat tasted and approved, which is obviously more important. Stella Blue Coffee's delicious roasts are available in cold brew, K-Cups, and ground and whole bean formats to seamlessly fit into your morning coffee routine. And every bag sold helps save dogs. So head to your local Jewel, Osco, or Mariano's today to find the very best deals on Stella Blue Coffee, or use promo code WALK for 20% off any order of $25 or more on StellaBlueCoffee.com. Take back your morning with Stella Blue Coffee. All right, let's get back into the episode.
It really is, and it feels like the kind of thing that happens when everybody in a town knows everyone else, and everyone was, you're married to my next door neighbor, and we served together on this force, and we were in this, if you dig down deeper, there's reports of different people in this family getting popped for like drunk driving, and the case got broomed, and the son, Colin, the college freshman, he said on the stand that he's never been in a fight before. Okay, then how did you get these bruises all over your knuckles in this photo that you took at a bar called Fenway Johnny's like a short time after this? I fell on the ice and I landed on my knuckles, which no human being reacts to slipping or falling by putting their knuckles out. But that was his excuse. Again, he says he's never been in a fight. Well, Mahatma Gandhi here has like dozens of videos on social media. Again, Turtle Boy dug these up of him like just threatening people, threatening like this hockey team who was facing or something, and then his videos like bang bang. Okay, yeah, real pacifist, like real Ralph Waldo Emerson here. But again, every time one of these people says something on the stand, there's the monkeys come flying out of the witch's castle that is Twitter, and has all this contradictory evidence to refute everything that they're saying. It's friggin' wild. And it's also really it's us exporting mass hole culture to the world. Like every time I watch one of these videos of these lawyers, I think, what does this sound like to them? Because it's constantly like Sidebar, Your Honor. It's were you drinking whiskeys and sodas? No, Jameson and gingers. What was he drinking? Beers. There was one time when they were texting one of the people involved to get him to come out to the bar, and he was reluctant to. It was like late at night, so they started calling him a pussy. Now, if that has ever worked on you, I raise my hand to that. But one of the ways they enticed him to come out was to let him know Sully's already here. Now, if you walk into any bar in Norfolk County, Massachusetts, and go, "Hey, Sully," 37% of the people will turn their heads and go, "What?" So, yeah, this is us in all our splendor and all our glory.
And it's not obviously like a Murdaugh situation where they had that level of power, but they were law enforcement. So that mixed with it being a tight-knit town, that kind of seems like what it's all boiling down to, is everyone kind of has each other's back.
For sure. And, again, the homeowner, Brian Albert, it pains me to say this, to even suspect him, because this guy has been like an exemplary cop. He's broken cases. He's captured fugitives. He figured out a way to get some DNA to prove the identity of the Boston Strangler when that was in doubt, like years later. And John O'Keefe obviously is the greatest tragedy of this. Served with distinction, seemed like a good guy on and off the force in his personal life or whatever. And you can laugh at some of the ridiculousness of it, and Lord knows I'm doing it. But I have to keep coming back to the fact that a man lost his life in this, and there's 2 teenage kids who've been orphaned now, like a second time, basically. And there's real human tragedy in here, but it's just such like a farce. You can't help it. In fact, just yesterday, as we're doing this, we're talking on Tuesday, so Monday of this week, the lead investigator, this Michael Proctor, the guy who should have been conflicted out of this from the beginning, he finally took the stand. And I don't know if you saw the most recent post I did about this, but it brought the whole thing to a new level of absurdity. They've got all his old text where the least of his problems is that one of the women involved in this family had texted him and said, "Hey, one of the McCabe's would like to would like to buy you a gift because you've been so great." This is like days after he took over the investigation. And rather than say, "I can't do that, that's a conflict of interest, that's a bribe, no gifts, please," that's I have rules I have to follow. He just said, "Well, have her give it to my wife." And again, that's the least of his problems, because where do we go on dog walk as far as language?
You could say whatever you want, Jerry.
Okay, because I'm quoting now. They've got his text to both like friends and family of his, and also his superior officers in this, where he said, among other things, that Karen Reed, not bad looking, but has no ass. She's he called her a cunt. Revealed that she's got medical issues, where he said, she leaks out of her balloon knot. She leaks poo. Like, okay, there are 17 people currently on the jury. 10 of them are women. And I'm not one to do that. Well, as a handsome Irishman, I believe this, or, as a Republican, as a female, as a whatever, as a veteran, as a parent. I don't like that kind of like just seeing the world through your own little prism. But if you're a woman sitting on this jury and you're hearing the lead investigator reading his own texts where he's calling the defendant a cunt and saying that he hates her, he also said, "I hope she kills herself." If you're reading that, hearing that, are you going to believe every other thing that he says about the pieces of taillight that he found, and that he conducted this thing completely above board? Or are you going to say, this guy belongs zip tied and frog walked out of here by the feds. And apparently the women on the jury, including people, according to people who were there, were all like looking around at each other like, did you just hear this? Like, what are we doing?
Wow.
And I can't stress it enough. This is the prosecution's case so far. The defense hasn't called anybody. To talk in a sports metaphor, the defense is still on the field. They haven't touched the ball yet, and they're up 4 touchdowns. Actually, after yesterday, it's probably like 5 touchdowns, 3 pick sixes and 2 scoop and score fumbles and maybe a safety or 2. This is the state laying out the best case that they have. And it's been one rake that they've stepped on after another, to the point where it almost feels like they're trying to just take a dive on this and hope that they don't all end up being rounded up by the FBI.
And to be clear, I assume all those text messages were after the incident, right?
Yes.
Okay. So
he was investigating this, because again, this case has been going on roughly 2.5 years. So really starting from the time he was assigned this, to sitting down with Karen Reed to get her statement, she turned her phone over to him, at which point he just started combing through it. And I left this out too. He had friends asking him, so, what's the deal with her? He go, well, I got her phone right now. I'm looking for nudes.
Oh, fuck. What a good. So at the very least, this guy's a piece of shit in other ways.
Yeah, and it's one thing if it's you and your friends. I mean, you and I seem like similar kind of guys. I'm sure there are things in your text threads that you never want to have get out, or else say goodbye to your appointment to the Supreme Court, right? I mean, believe me, I had a friend die recently, and I remember saying to my buddies, like, I'm sorry, I miss him, but you know what? That's one less witness to all the dumb shit that we did when we were younger. Thank you for taking that stuff to the grave, Bob. But to be involved in a criminal investigation, and not just involved, but leading the whole thing, like you're in charge of presenting this, and you're not only just being a total bucket of guts to the defendant and saying that you hate her and that you hope she kills herself and calling her names. He actually was reaching out to the medical examiner and saying things like, we're investigating this as a homicide. Don't look into an accident. You're going to be barking up the wrong tree there, however he phrased it. So essentially he shot an arrow and then told the medical examiner to just draw a bullseye around where it landed so that he can prove his theory, not let's find out what the truth of this is and wherever it leads. And there's been other elements of cover-ups that haven't really been part of the evidence yet because the defense hasn't, again, begun to call witnesses. But that dog that attacked him, allegedly, theoretically, they sent it away. They rehoused it, they called it. They sent it to Vermont. Why? They'd had this dog for years. There's a belief that they dug up a section of the floor of their basement, like took a jackhammer, dug it up, repaved it, like John Wick, getting like all his coins for the Continental out of a floor of his garage, and that they filled in their swimming pool. And then they sold the house. That much we know. They sold the house after all this, where they'd been living for years. So all that either means that they just had these major changes in their life, coincidentally, or that it was all part of a massive cover-up to save their asses. I guess I leave it to the viewer to decide.
Now, have they talked much about cause of death, blunt force trauma? Was it hypothermia? Has that been, went through yet?
Another A+ question. And to my knowledge, no. And I'm not riveted to this all the time, but I don't even think that they've had an actual coroner say, I did the autopsy and this is what I determined what it is. I also think that they haven't, unless they did it and it didn't resonate with anyone. I don't even think that they've submitted a death certificate. as a lawyer friend of mine says, without that, they technically don't even have a dead body for this. Like the jury can't assume that there's a dead body just because they've been sitting there for 6.5 weeks listening to talk of a dead body, unless you officially have the paper in there. Like that part in Jaws where Brody is typing in shark attack. Like I don't know what it says in that box in whatever corner report there happens to be, which makes it even that much more bizarre.
Yeah, that is. And so you said the prosecution's gone so far, right?
That's all it's been. And if I lost count of how many witnesses they've had, more than 60. I think they're talking about like 84. And the defense has said, you know what, we've got, we can wrap our section up in this in about 4 days. So, and really, it's almost like they don't have to do much because they're getting it out from the prosecution. I mean, all that stuff that I mentioned about Proctor reading those texts about cunt and balloon knots or whatever, that was
Why did that happen, though? I'm having trouble understanding why that even was discussed if they're trying to prosecute her.
Excellent question. It might be that, and I've heard this theory, that it's the DA just like they're stuck with this dog of a case and they're just trying to distance themselves so they can just say, hey, look, we were just doing the best we could. Or maybe they're just being too clever by half. Like, okay, let's just get it all out there. Let's take the power out of these accusations by admitting to them. But as a lot of people pointed out, at no point when he was reading these texts did he say anything. Is there something you'd like to say to the defendant? Yeah, I'm sorry. He just this was unprofessional, and I shouldn't have been doing that. And and he also tried to skirt around reading some of it. Like there's a female judge who people have tended to say that she's really favoring the prosecution. Like people think if there's any kind of this is in the bag, she's in on it. Full disclosure, I worked with her on several occasions. I have no professional relationship with her whatsoever, but just so that I'm not hiding anything, I don't have any opinion here or there on her. But as he's reading the text, he stops and he says, CUNT, objection. And she goes, are these your words, Trooper Proctor? He goes, yes. Okay, then say it the way you said it. like if you think I'm covering up for you when you're sitting there C-bombing the defendant, forget it. Own your words. You said it. This is you. So there's still a long way to go in this, and I'm trying to cover it enough that it resonates with Barstool readers, but not be obsessed on it, because there's other things in our life, Lord knows it, but there's plenty of people who are totally dedicated to this. They're outside the courthouse every day protesting. They've got T-shirts. They're wearing wigs to make themselves look like the judge. It's like anything that we touch now in the world as it's constituted. It's a total clown show everywhere you look. And I'm trying to keep up with it. I tried to stay neutral for as long as I could, and it didn't last long. There's just no way to spin this other than it's a disaster for the people trying to find this woman guilty.
And what would you say the area is siding with? Is it kind of, if you took a poll, we looking like 99%?
Yeah, I think it's getting there. There's been some holdouts, some real hardcore, people dedicated to the belief that she's guilty. And I've heard from a lot of them. I mean, I got a lawyer friend who's sticking by his story that the defense has nothing. And he's a practicing trial attorney in Massachusetts. He's been a prosecutor. He's been a defense lawyer. And he says there's nothing there. I've heard from people who are part of this family or connected to this family, the Alberts and the McCabe's, the people who own the house where this happened, and said, you don't understand. You need to really, here's some information that, you need to know. And I try to include that to the extent that I can. But I went from being as neutral as I possibly could to just saying, this is such a goat fuck of major proportions. I don't know how you can see it any other way. If I learned anything over the last 4 years, it's don't believe anything you hear on the internet. You know what I mean? If we believed everything they were saying 4 years ago, then we'd think that, COVID happened because someone ate a pangolin and you need to wear a mask and that will keep you safe or whatever. So I didn't buy any of the stuff that people are saying, and I try to be responsible to Barstool and not go off on these like accusations that I can't back up. I've just been saying, this is what's being reported. That's what's being reported. But if you look at it from the Occam's razor perspective, what's most likely to have happened? One, this woman plotted to intentionally kill the man whose niece and nephew she was helped to raise by speeding up and backing into him, hoping to kill him instantly, not injure him, but kill him. Or he walked into the house, everything went sideways. In a panic, they decided, how can we cover this up? It's one of those two stories. There's no third alternative. And you can quibble about who threw the punches and whatever, but between the scratch marks on his arm and the gash on the back of his head, none of that looks like it's consistent to me with a car backing into somebody, even at a high rate of speed. It looks like it was an absolute mayhem inside the basement of this house, and they did what they thought would work out best in a panic and thought that nobody would be paying attention, and everyone's paying attention.
And she's being charged with first or second?
Second. Which still means intentional. Mm-hmm. It still means that she set out to murder him. It's not like manslaughter. She's not being charged with a car accident or whatever. It's saying that she meant to kill this guy in the most sloppy, half-assed, haphazard way imaginable. And he was found 12 feet from the road. And all those shards of taillight were found around him. Not like they didn't drop to the pavement. They flew along with his body. Like, I don't know what law of physics dictates the motion of tiny pieces of hard plastic, but that's what they're saying. And also, they found his phone underneath him. When I mentioned the thing about early on about how, Jen McCabe called him all those times, the simple solution there is, what do you do when you can't find your phone? You have someone call it. That's a hell of a lot easier to accept that she was trying to locate this thing so she could get it out of her house and put it with him where they were putting his body, than to believe that she just kept dialing him while it was sitting in the back pocket of her jeans.
It sounds like to me too, Jerry. I mean, the defense kind of lies within the tail light, right? Like if there's, because how many weeks was it? 2, you said? If there's footage of her from the drive-thru at Dunkin' and that thing's still intact and the video quality's good enough, right? I don't know. Yeah,
well, I mentioned missing Ring camera footage from the neighbor across the street. Mm-hmm. I neglected to mention that there's 2 minutes missing from the Canton Public Library, which you would have had to drive past. There's footage missing from the Canton police station where the vehicle was brought in. There is, however, and I'll get back to that Canton police station in a minute because this is super sketchy. There is camera footage from the place where John O'Keefe lived, of his driveway. And at night, when she was going out to look for him, she backs up and nudges his car, to the point where when the defense did that thing in every spy movie, they go, zoom in, enhance, zoom in, enhance. They enhanced it, and you can see his SUV rock on its wheel, which doesn't mean that she shattered the taillight, but might indicate that she cracked it. Well, a police officer from another town over testified on Monday, and he has no dog in this fight. And he said, I saw that her taillight was cracked. There was a small piece missing out of it. Cracked. They have, they're claiming that it was just shattered beyond belief. And there's pieces the size of like a Pop-Tart with a bite out of it that they found many days later as they kept going back to the scene looking, and I'm doing air quotes, looking for pieces of it.
Are there pictures public yet?
See, there's not great pictures. There's some that seem to indicate like that was 5:30 in the morning when she was driving around. It looks like it's intact. Nothing to me that's conclusive. But last week they present, this is again the prosecution, video of the garage at the Canton police station where this Michael Proctor and these other investigators were looking around the back of the vehicle. But after looking at it for a little bit, it took a second for everyone to catch on to the fact that, hold on, this whole thing has been mirror flipped. The whole image is left is right and right is left. Like the car pulls in and it looks like the officer driving in, climbed out of the passenger seat because they did a 180 on it. They didn't say they did. And when you present any visual evidence in a courtroom, you always ask the witness, is this a fair and accurate representation? You know what I mean? If it was some land dispute, they'd show aerial photo of your house. Is this a fair and accurate depiction? If it was a car accident, is this a fair and accurate depiction? This officer said, yep, sure is. Never mentioned, well, except that it's all flipped 180 degrees. Well, why would you do that? Yeah. When the entire case is predicated on one taillight and not the other, why do you flip the image? Why do you not mention it? Why do you not point out the obvious that there's like signs in the background that are backwards, and yet the timestamp on it was forwards, meaning someone flipped the image and then applied the timestamp like when you get your windshield removed and they put the inspection sticker on the new one, like they peeled it off, reversed it, put it back on, and then presented this to a jury. In between this and then the testimony of like the text messages about, the balloon knot or whatever, there are plenty of these YouTube attorneys saying the state should do the right thing. Come in tomorrow. The elected district attorney of the county should come in there and just go, we dropped the case. We can't prosecute this anymore. It's a waste of everybody's time. But so far they haven't. And I mean, just the fact that you're presenting flipped video, so somebody, I wish I had thought of it, but someone just did a Zoom video where they held up a paper that says murder and then flipped it so that it said red rum. My second Shining reference, I've bagged my limit on those. And I wish I'd thought of it because that's what this is. It's just another example of everything is altered or couched in some kind of... There's
more explanation to everything. Nothing is ever what it is at the surface.
And not one of them is a quality explanation for anything. Like there's rarely do you see a thing where you can sit there and go, well, objectively speaking, that's a good point by them.
Yeah.
The really they have is the taillight and the claims that she said, I hit him. And all of that is in dispute. And even that's pretty thin. Now, real quick too, they gathered the evidence at the scene. They scooped up like his blood that was in the snow that was at the scene. And I'm not kidding you. You're going to think I'm making this up. They showed pictures to the jury of the evidence they gathered. It was in red Solo cups and a paper bag from Stop and Shop that they had borrowed from the police lieutenant who lived across the street. They grabbed red Solo cups and put them in a paper bag, and they had them in the garage where the car was. And then lo and behold, they say they found little bits of blood and like hair on the bumper that had survived all this driving around the entire night. It somehow magically adhered itself to the back of the vehicle.
In a snowstorm.
But they put blood in red Solo cups.
Jesus. What a disaster.
Right. That alone, you just say, well, that's kind of sloppy police work. If that's all it felt like, but it feels like something way more sinister. And it sure looks for all the world like an innocent woman has had her life turned inside out and upside down and backwards after she lost the man of her life. And the only motive that they've really given, and I'm not kidding you, a bunch of these people, so this all happened at the end of January, went on a New Year's trip to Aruba. And I apologize to everyone in Aruba then that 30 massholes descended upon that quiet little resort island. And that John O'Keefe, the deceased, hugged somebody. And Karen Reed saw this and thought that they were making out. And she got really mad. And they were FUing each other. And they got all massholey or whatever. And that's what started all this. Now, they left out the part where she then bought dinner for like a table of 6 because she felt bad that about this misunderstanding, whatever. This is the kind of terrible person she was. No, instead, what the state wants you to believe is she held that grudge for a month and then on a snowy night saw her opportunity to rub this guy out with this perfectly placed taillight into his midsection that caused his death. It's, even as I say it, it sounds idiotic that it ever got out of the grand jury stage where they say, look, no one's going to buy this. What are we doing here? But they were motivated to make sure that it didn't get pinned on the people who own that house, who are at that house, who were drunk that night, allegedly.
It's wild stuff, Jerry. It's wild stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It hasn't even begun. I hope I made sense of this for everybody.
I think you did a great job. And this is week 6, right, of the trial?
Yes, like week 6.5, basically. It's Massachusetts, too. As a former court officer, I can tell you this is the pace at which things go. Mm-hmm. Like last week, they did like 1 day worth of evidence. Being a state employee is where you get to hear the words, have a good weekend on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. And we should know, too, you already said it, but we are recording on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, so things may happen by the time this airs on Thursday. And then when does this seem like it's going to wrap up? Is there any expectation of when that could be?
We still have weeks to go. I mean, especially at the snail's pace that the prosecution's going. I think they just, part of their strategy is to just bore everybody into submission. I mean, on and on and on. This guy goes on with this monotone about, so when you went into the bar, were it high top tables or were they low top tables? Where was the band? Like, we don't care. Just get to the part where they talk about what they saw and what they observed or whatever. So he's got weeks to go. Again, the defense has said when the ball's in their court, they got 4 days. So, you know, the good Lord willing, if the creeks don't rise, maybe before 4th of July, because then things are going to really slow down. And I feel bad about these jurors who did nothing to deserve this other than answer the mail, see a summon and show up where they're supposed to, you know. Yeah. I will say this, I'll speechify a little bit. As irreverent as I am, as little respect as I have for a lot of things, I can tell you 100% honesty, jurors really take this duty seriously. Like no matter how small a case it is, and I've seen some as little as, you know, a civil small claims dispute over a wedding dress to I've worked double homicides. And people don't want to have to be there, but once they're there, they really try to do it with the best they can, be as fair and impartial as they can be. So, you know, like they said in the movie JFK, let justice be done, though the heavens fall. Wherever this goes, I hope who's ever responsible gets punished and gets punished severely.
Yeah, Jerry, thank you for jumping on. We'll kind of put a pin in it and see what happens from here. If there is someone on the opposite side that maybe wants to come on and we do an update or something, if people enjoyed this kind of catch up and everything, let us know. I think you would be down to do that maybe. If not, yeah, it sounds like Turtle Boy's doing a good job. Reporter Dave Cullinane, I saw he's covering it. So a lot of places to keep up with it. And then Jerry, of course, at Jerry Thornton 1.
Yep, exactly. And on Barstool every day, and been doing this an update on this at least once a week, sometimes more as it gets more sensational.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it.
Oh, I really really appreciate you guys in Chicago doing a kick-ass job. I'm a big fan of your work. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jerry. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. That's it for today. That's it for this week. We'll see you all on Monday.